They didn't even use the word fired. Just a security guard at my elbow, a new manager with too much hair gel, and a single sentence that sliced through 17 years of my life. Your role no longer aligns with our forward strategy. That was it. No thank you. No recognition, not even a handshake. Just the kind of corporate jargon people use when they don't want to admit what they're doing. I smiled, nodded, and let them escort me out of the glass tower I'd walked into at 7:15 every morning for nearly 2 decades. On the surface, I looked calm, maybe even relieved. My coworkers avoided my eyes, some with pity, others with barely disguised smirks. But inside, something shifted. Because while they thought they were cutting out legacy overhead, they had forgotten one detail, a single clause buried deep in the contracts, written in plain legal ink. Without me, every single operating license this company depended on was void. I kept that knowledge tucked behind my smile as I handed over my badge. It hadn't always been like this. When I first joined the company, we were a scrappy little biotech startup trying to prove ourselves. Compliance wasn't glamorous work, but it was essential. I handled the paperwork no one else understood: federal operating permits, export licenses, medical device certifications. I made sure every shipment, every contract, every regulatory audit passed without a single red flag. 17 years later, I wasn't flashy. I didn't have Darren's gleaming suit or Madison's TikTok confidence, but I was the spine that held this whole organism upright. The one who wrote the systems people mocked as overly detailed, but relied on every single day. That's the thing about quiet people like me. We don't need applause. But when we're gone, the silence we leave behind is deafening. The firing itself was staged like theater. The new manager, Greg Whitfield, leaned against the HR desk like he was auditioning for a commercial. Early 30s, MBA fresh off the printer, voice polished by too many podcasts. "We're streamlining," he said, flashing his perfect teeth. "Focusing on innovation, cutting out the old bottlenecks. We need agile systems, Alice. Not rigid gatekeepers." That's what he called me, gatekeeper. I wanted to laugh right there in his face, because what he didn't realize was that I wasn't a gatekeeper. I was the gate itself. Without me, there was no entry, no approvals, no legality. But I didn't argue. I didn't fight. I just smiled, signed the paper he slid across the desk, and watched as HR stamped, "Terminated effective immediately." As security walked me out, I remembered the clause, Section 12B, tucked into the operational compliance agreement I had written myself years ago when the company first entered regulated markets. It was my insurance policy, one I never thought I'd actually need. In the event of involuntary termination, all federal certifications and licenses sponsored by the company shall remain under the employee's name until properly reassigned and approved by governing agencies. Translation: fire me without planning, and every license collapses. And Greg, he hadn't even glanced at the old contracts. That night, I sat in my small apartment with a glass of tea and the city lights spilling through the window. My phone buzzed with messages from old colleagues, some apologetic, some nosy. I ignored them all. Instead, I opened my personal terminal, inserted a secure USB, and logged into the National Licensing Database with my biometric key. One by one, I checked them. FDA device compliance authorized under Alice M. Hayes. Export certification ID authorized under Alice M. Hayes. Federal biotech handling permit authorized under Alice M. Hayes. 32 active licenses, all tied to me. They hadn't transferred a single one. I leaned back in my chair, heartbeat steady. They thought they'd erased me from the building. But on paper, in the eyes of the federal government, I was the building. By Monday morning, I knew chaos would start to brew. I could already picture it: vendors sending error messages, shipment delays, internal systems rejecting new credentials, the compliance dashboard blinking red instead of green, and at the top of it all, Greg standing there with his polished smile, wondering why nothing worked. When I closed my laptop that night, I didn't feel vengeful. I felt certain. They had treated me like background noise, like outdated infrastructure. But tomorrow, the silence would roar louder than any speech Greg could give. Because here's the truth about betrayal in business or in life. People think it happens in a single moment, a firing, a slammed door, a final word. But betrayal is slower than that. It's built on years of being overlooked, dismissed, underestimated, until one day the person you thought was expendable reminds you why you needed them all along. And me? I didn't need revenge. The system itself would speak for me. I could almost hear it, the hum of idle monitors, the clatter of early keyboards, the low murmur of voices before the day truly began. For 17 years, I had lived inside that rhythm. Now, the rhythm would falter without me. I didn't have to wait long. At 9:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from Jules, one of the junior analysts who had always been kind to me. Something weird. Shipment to Metatron flagged. License ID not valid. They're asking who the officer of record is. I set my coffee down slowly. One license error wasn't surprising. But I knew better. If one was failing, more would follow. By 9:30, another message. 2 vendors can't process orders. Same error code. Greg told us to just update the license info, but the portal rejected it. I pictured Greg standing there in his fitted blazer, telling everyone to keep calm. He probably thought it was a small glitch, the kind of problem IT could patch. He had no idea he was staring into the mouth of something much larger. Around mid-morning, Jules called me directly. Her voice was tight, like someone trying not to be overheard. They're panicking, Alice. Orders are stacking up. Darren's in the conference room saying it's just a transition hiccup, but the compliance portal keeps spitting back the same error. No authorized certifying officer found. I didn't answer right away. I listened to the sound of her breathing, the edge of fear in it. She had always respected the systems I built, unlike most of them. Jules, I said finally, calm as I could manage, check the federal registry. Look up who the licenses are still tied to. She hesitated. You mean? Yes. A beat passed, then a soft gasp. They're all still under your name. I thanked her quietly and told her to be careful. Then I ended the call. By noon, the cracks widened. I knew because another message arrived, this time from an old colleague in logistics. We can't move inventory. Customs flagged the export certification as invalid. Trucks are sitting in the lot. Greg wants to override it, but the federal portal won't allow it. My hand stayed steady, but I felt the weight of what was happening. Without those licenses, nothing moved. Not the devices, not the raw materials, not the paperwork. The company wasn't just delayed. It was paralyzed. I imagined the boardroom, the rows of young analysts shifting uncomfortably in their seats while Greg barked orders. He probably told them to stay innovative and not worry about outdated protocols. Meanwhile, every system I had built for 17 years was blinking red. That afternoon, I decided to walk. The city felt different when you weren't rushing to the office. People hurried with phones pressed to their ears. Taxis honked in tight streets, but for me, there was no urgency. I bought a sandwich, sat on a park bench, and let the noise of the world wash over me. My phone buzzed again. Jules, of course. Alice, you won't believe this. The FDA showed up for the Q3 inspection. 3 auditors right in the lobby. Greg nearly turned white. They're asking for portal access. No one can log in. Darren tried your old credentials. The system flagged it as fraud. I closed my eyes for a moment. The FDA inspection. Of course, it came every year around this time. I had always prepared the team weeks in advance. Now, without me, they were walking blind into it. By 4 p.m., the story had reached me without even trying. A former coworker texted, "What did you do? The company's on fire. Everyone's saying nothing works without you." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That evening, I sat by my window again, the city lights shimmering against the glass. For the first time in months, I felt no weight on my chest. No deadlines, no urgent calls, just quiet. I knew tomorrow would be worse for them. The audit report would land, shipments would stall, vendors would escalate, and sooner or later, someone higher up, the CEO himself, would return from holiday and see the wreckage. He would ask the only question that mattered: who thought firing Alice was a good idea? I took a slow sip of tea, the bitterness grounding me. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about truth. They had dismissed me as legacy overhead, background noise, unnecessary, but systems don't care about ego. Licenses don't care about charisma. And the truth was simple. I was the license. By Tuesday morning, the silence broke. My phone buzzed with 3 messages before I even finished breakfast. Vendors demanding updates, colleagues whispering about auditors refusing to proceed, and one message from Jules. The CEO is back. He looks furious. I set my spoon down gently. I had expected this moment. Callum Vance didn't like surprises, especially not ones waiting for him after a holiday. I remembered him well. Sharp suits, sharper eyes, the kind of man who built the company by sheer force of will. He wasn't cruel in the way Greg was, but he was dismissive. To him, compliance was background noise. Necessary, but never glamorous. I had been invisible to him. Just another cog. Now, he was about to find out what happened when the cog wasn't there anymore. Later that morning, Jules called me, whispering as though she were hiding under her desk. You should have seen it, Alice. He walked in with his suitcase still in his hand. No one even greeted him. The whole floor was silent. He went straight to the conference room and slammed the folder they gave him on the table. I pictured it, Callum, suntan still fresh, confidence peeling away as he opened the internal dashboard for the first time since his return. They pulled it up on the screen, Jules continued. All red. Every license marked invalid or revoked. He asked Darren what he was looking at. Darren tried to spin it as a transition error. Callum cut him off. He asked one question, which idiot thought firing Alice was a good idea? I couldn't help it. I laughed quietly but fully. By noon, the damage was undeniable. The FDA auditors had left the building, filing their inspection as incomplete due to credential denial. Shipments were frozen in loading bays. Clients were calling, demanding answers. Another message popped up from a logistics manager I barely knew. We're dead in the water, Alice. Without you, we can't move a single product. Everyone's pointing fingers. Nobody wants to admit who signed off on this. I didn't reply. It wasn't my fight anymore. Around mid-afternoon, the storm worsened. One of the analysts forwarded me a screenshot, knowing I'd appreciate it. An internal Slack thread with Darren frantically typing, "Is there any way to restore Alice's license privileges temporarily?" The silence under his message said everything. Not a single reply. No one knew how to fix it. No one could. The irony was sharp. Just days ago, Darren had called me legacy overhead. Now he was begging, even if only in digital desperation, for my name to be restored. I went for a walk again, this time down by the river. The water was steady, unbothered by the chaos in offices stacked with glass and steel behind me. I thought about how many nights I had spent working late, making sure every renewal was filed on time, every regulation accounted for. No one had seen those hours. They only saw the clean dashboards, the approvals that slid through without hiccups. That invisibility had cost me my job. But now it was the very thing unraveling theirs. By evening, another message came through. This one from Graham Niles, Director of Operations, a man who once laughed openly at my color-coded compliance maps. Alice, it's Graham. Listen, we may have miscalculated. The licenses are gone. We need you back, at least temporarily. Just to stabilize things. I stared at the text. The words blurred by memory. Years of dismissals, years of being the afterthought in meetings, years of being cut out of the big picture. Now, the same people who smirked at me were scrambling. I didn't answer. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights low, city sounds muffled beyond the glass. For the first time in 17 years, I didn't feel tied to them. I wasn't bound by their deadlines or their arrogance. But I knew one thing. Tomorrow would be worse for them. The audit report would hit. Clients would begin to back away. Investors would notice. And all of it would trace back to the decision made in one smug conversation at an HR desk. They thought they could erase me. Instead, they had erased themselves. By Wednesday morning, the cracks had turned into fractures. I woke up to 3 emails from former colleagues, all with the same undertone: panic. One wrote that the export division had shut down entirely. Containers locked at the docks because no valid license could be attached to the paperwork. Another admitted their biggest supplier had frozen all deliveries until a recognized compliance officer signed off. The third was short, almost desperate. Alice, if you know anything we can do, please tell us. Everyone's drowning. I didn't answer. It wasn't mine to fix anymore. Around 10 a.m., Jules called again. Her voice carried that strained mix of disbelief and exhaustion. You should see it here. The CEO is holding emergency meetings every hour. Greg hasn't been seen since yesterday. Some say he's locked in his office. Others think Callum pushed him aside completely. Darren's still trying to make it sound temporary, but even legal is against him now. They keep saying it could take weeks, maybe months to reestablish all the licenses. I stayed silent. And Alice, she added after a pause, the board is furious. Investors are asking questions. Clients are threatening to walk. Callum actually said out loud, "We fired the wrong person." I don't think I've ever seen him admit something like that before. That made me laugh. Though it wasn't joy, it was irony. For years, I had sat in rooms where my warnings were brushed aside. My work treated as invisible. Now, the man who never once acknowledged me in a meeting was telling the board they'd made a mistake. By afternoon, I started seeing the fallout outside company walls. 2 industry blogs published short pieces about regulatory disruption at Neuroflux. They didn't mention my name, but the timing was clear. A few clients quietly updated their websites, removing Neuroflux's logo from their trusted partners page. I knew what that meant. In biotech, perception is everything. If clients and investors sensed weakness, the company would bleed faster than any internal failure could cause. That evening, Graham called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. His voice was lower than usual, stripped of the arrogance he once carried like a badge. "Alice," he began, "I know we didn't always see eye to eye. I know I dismissed your systems more times than I should have, but I'm asking you now. Not as a director, not even as a colleague, just as someone who's watched everything fall apart. Will you help us?" I let his words hang in the air. For a moment, I thought of the nights I'd worked late, the weekends I'd sacrificed, the years of giving everything to a company that had shown me so little in return. "Graham," I said finally, "you don't need me. You need to understand why I mattered in the first place. Until you do, nothing I could do would change what's happening." He tried to argue, but I ended the call. Later, as the city grew quiet outside, I opened my laptop. Not the company one they had taken from me, but my personal machine. I scrolled through job offers I had ignored for years. Smaller firms, rival companies, startups looking for stability. One name stood out, Helix Core. I had spoken to them once at a conference years ago. Back then, I had stayed loyal. Now, loyalty seemed like a relic. Their message was still sitting in my inbox, weeks old. "We admire your work. If you're ever ready for a change, our door is open." I read it twice, then began drafting a reply. On Thursday, word reached me that the FDA had officially marked Neuroflux as failed in their inspection. The report cited absence of valid certifying officer and multiple revoked licenses. The consequences were severe: fines, legal exposure, possible suspension of operations. Jules sent me a screenshot of Callum in the boardroom, face buried in his hands, while legal and operations argued across the table. "They're finished without you," she wrote simply. For the first time in days, I let myself feel something close to relief. Not satisfaction at their collapse, but relief that I was no longer carrying the weight of keeping them upright. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, darker than I usually liked it. The street below buzzed with life, people hurrying to dinners and late trains. For years, I had been chained to a system that only valued me when it was convenient. Now I realized I was free. The company had underestimated me, erased me, and in doing so, erased themselves. And as I pressed send on the reply to Helix Core, confirming a meeting for the following week, I knew one thing with certainty. This wasn't an ending. It was the beginning of something I should have done a long time ago. By Friday morning, my apartment felt lighter. I'd slept through the night for the first time in months. Helix Core had replied within an hour of my message. A brief call that turned into a 3-hour conversation about risk process and how you build a company that doesn't collapse when one person leaves. They didn't ask me for secrets, shortcuts, or access. They asked me how to do it right. We agreed on something simple and clean, a short-term advisory contract starting Monday, pending a full-time offer after references and compliance checks. Realistic, respectful, legal. They sent over paperwork the same afternoon. I read every line and signed. By noon, Neuroflux was everywhere online. Not in headlines, just in the places that matter: procurement bulletins, vendor forums, regulatory lists. Inspection failed. Licenses revoked. Temporary suspension pending remediation. 2 clients publicly announced a pause in partnership pending certification continuity. They didn't name the company, but anyone in our space could read the map. Jules called after lunch. Darren's been reassigned. Project liaison. No clearance. Greg hasn't returned to the floor. Callum fired off an all-staff note about rebuilding our trust with regulators and respecting the expertise that keeps us compliant. You were the subtext of every line. I thanked her and kept my voice steady. How are you holding up? She exhaled, tired, angry. But I learned more this week than in 2 years. I'll never treat the quiet parts like background again. That landed. Quiet parts. The ones you notice only when they're gone. At 5, my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost let it pass, then answered. Alice, it's Callum. His voice didn't bother with small talk. I'll be direct. We made a mistake. I approved a mistake. We need you to come back, even temporarily. Name your terms. In another life, maybe I would have wanted that sentence. Recognition, urgency, a hand outstretched. But I'd already made peace with leaving. I can't come back, I said. Not as an employee. And not to undo a choice you made on purpose. He was quiet then. Is there any legal way to accelerate reauthorization? No, I said. There's only the way. The same way I did it every year. Training, exams, interviews, registration. Weeks, not days. That's the point. It's supposed to prevent exactly what happened to you. He didn't argue. For what it's worth, he said, I'm sorry. I heard you asked who fired me, I replied. You already know where to aim the apology. He let out a breath that sounded older than he was. Good luck, Alice. You too, I said, and meant it. Not for his sake. He'd survive. But for the people who didn't choose any of this. On Monday, I rode the elevator to Helix Core's 21st floor with a temporary badge clipped to my sweater. No fanfare, no tour. Just a neat conference room and a small team waiting with notebooks. Camila, the junior analyst leading the session, had highlighted half the printout I'd sent over the weekend. She opened with the question I wish someone had asked me years ago. If we had to run tomorrow with 2 people out sick and 1 on leave, what breaks? Good question, I said. Let's build around that. We drew the map that morning. Who holds what authority, where the backups sit, where procedures live, and how they're tested. We wrote contact chains that were actually usable, not just diagrams for slide decks. We documented the boring things, the dates, the renewal windows, the audit prep checklists. And then we spaced responsibility so no single person became a single point of failure. I insisted on one more rule in writing. The person who keeps the company legal will never be the cheapest line on the budget. At lunch, I walked 2 blocks for soup and ate it in the sun. I checked my phone once. A LinkedIn notification had climbed past the point of politeness. I changed my profile line to 4 words: Compliance Advisor, Helix Core. No speeches, no thread, just a fact. By midweek, 2 former clients messaged privately. Short, careful notes about continuity and trust. I reminded them I couldn't discuss Neuroflux and wouldn't. They appreciated that more than any pitch. Respect is a currency, and you spend it slowly. That same afternoon, Jules sent a photo of the Neuroflux lobby. The glossy sign dimmed to a reflection, a clipboard at reception with a visitor log that read the same name 3 times, Regulatory Enforcement Unit. Beneath it, a handwritten note on the guard's desk: no unescorted access to compliance or export areas. It was the right policy. I wish they'd learned it for a different reason. That night, I finally let myself feel everything I'd been moving past. The years, the dismissals, the tiny ways people made a person disappear while still using her work. I cried. Not long, not loudly, but enough. Then I washed my face, made tea, and laid out the next day's agenda: internal training at 9, draft of Helix's annual audit calendar at 10, a one-on-one with Camila at 2 to talk about her certification path. On Thursday, Helix's dashboards turned all green for the first time under my watch. Not because we cut corners, but because we didn't. We scheduled the renewals. We assigned backups. We ran a small tabletop drill for what if the officer of record quits tomorrow. Everyone laughed at the scenario, then did the work anyway. That laugh is the safe kind, the kind that comes with respect, not denial. Friday afternoon, I took the long way home. I passed the old building without stopping. Through the lobby glass, a delivery sat unopened by the security desk. Paperwork taped to the side, hold. No valid certifying officer. It was not revenge. It was gravity. Back in my apartment, the sunset cut a warm line across the bookshelf. I wrote a short note on a sticky and pressed it to the edge of my monitor, the way I always had, in case they forget. The invisible work is the work. I'm not the only one who needs the reminder. Jules texted one last time before the week ended. I'm interviewing next week. Your checklist saved me today. Good, I wrote back. Carry it with you. Make sure the next place earns you. I closed the window, set my phone face down, and let the quiet arrive. Not the silence of being overlooked, but the kind you choose. The world kept moving. So did I. And for the first time in years, I wasn't holding anything together except my own life.